Welcome to this explainer. Look, we've all been there, right? You lay in bed, completely exhausted. I mean, every muscle in your body is just begging for sleep. But the second your head hits the pillow, boom, your brain decides it's the perfect time to host a loud, uninvited talk show. It's replaying old conversations with an ex, maybe a former friend, or just someone who walked away. You're lying there, tossing and turning, convincing yourself you just miss them. Well, today, we're going to dive deep into the hidden psychology behind this late-night overthinking and figure out exactly why your mind does this to you. Let's jump right into Chapter 1, The Late-Night Illusion. We need to start by confronting a highly personal question to challenge your assumptions. When you're staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., feeling all that heartache, are you actually longing for that specific person? I know, it feels incredibly real in the moment. But we really need to pause and ask, is it them you miss, or is it something else entirely? Here is where a massive psychological pivot happens. The myth we tell ourselves is, I miss them. But the reality, you miss the emotional relief. Our minds, they're highly adaptive, right? They're constantly learning from emotional pain and looking for ways to protect our egos. So when a connection ends, your brain isn't just processing the loss of a human being. Actually, scratch that. It's more like it's processing the sudden loss of a powerful psychological feedback loop that used to keep you comfortable. You don't necessarily miss them. You're just missing how safe they made you feel. Which brings us perfectly to Chapter 2, Mourning Fake Futures. The clinical term for what's going on here is early obsession. This is when your mind literally fills in the gaps of reality with pure imagination. Think about it. When you look back at someone you miss, your brain doesn't focus on the objective, everyday facts of the relationship, like who forgot to take out the trash. No way. It focuses on the potential. It mentally creates this illusion of closeness by replaying conversations and dreaming up scenarios that honestly never even happened. And this highlights an absolutely crucial point. You aren't mourning the real, flawed person. You are mourning the beautiful future fantasy your brain built around them. You see, your brain is incredibly reward-driven. The anticipation of a perfect, rosy future feels way more exciting than dealing with the messy reality. It's kind of like grieving a beautifully painted illusion instead of the real thing. Let's explore how this ties into Chapter 3, The Dopamine Withdrawal Trap. Let's say you're feeling emotionally neglected, lonely, or just super stressed out. In that state, your brain treats any kind of validation like instant relief. I mean, even the smallest amount of attention from someone can trigger this massive rush of dopamine. It's like finding a glass of water in a desert. This rapid chemical release forges a very fast, extremely intense emotional attachment. So when that person leaves, that painful longing you feel, it isn't actually a craving for that specific individual. What it really is a brutal withdrawal from emotional comfort. Your mind is just desperate to escape the sheer discomfort of loneliness and the anxiety of uncertainty. You're literally going through dopamine withdrawal, and your brain is cleverly tricking you into thinking, oh, this must be heartbreak. This naturally leads us into Chapter 4, Craving Familiar Pain. Psychologists define this through something called the mere exposure effect. Basically, it's the rule that our brains absolutely crave predictability, because predictability gives us a powerful sense of security. The more we experience something, even if it's completely toxic or bad for us, the more comfortable and normal it starts to feel to our nervous system. Because of this effect, your brain will actively choose a predictable struggle over an unknown opportunity every single time. Even if a past relationship was totally draining or emotionally empty, your brain knew exactly how to survive within it. It had a map for that environment, you know? Ultimately, your mind views the familiar pain of the past as emotionally safer than the terrifying uncertainty of being alone or having to start all over again. You keep going back to the memory of them simply because familiar discomfort always feels safer to our primitive brains than stepping into an uncertain opportunity. Let's shift gears a bit to Chapter 5, The Need for Control. Why do some of us get trapped in this loop longer than others? Well, it often comes down to this. If you're a deep feeler, you naturally pay a lot more attention to things like tone of voice, facial expressions, and those subtle emotional shifts. Because of this, deep feelers form attachments way faster, and they spend so much more time analyzing these tiny details long after everyone else has moved on. When a connection ends, your highly sensitive mind is just desperately searching for meaning to process the emotional impact. So it repeatedly drags up old memories just to view them from a dozen different angles. And this perfectly explains why this phenomenon almost always attacks us at night. Think about your daytime brain state. You're distracted by work, your phone, the constant noise. All of that acts as a filter, keeping those heavier, deeper emotions buried right beneath the surface. But at nighttime, it's quiet. There are zero external distractions. That sudden silence literally forces all those unprocessed, messy thoughts to float straight to the surface. Once those thoughts surfaced, your anxious mind starts frantically searching for control. It begins mentally rehearsing past conversations and endlessly replaying bad decisions. Why? Because the mind falsely believes that if it just thinks about the situation enough, it can somehow prevent future disappointment, or maybe magically regain control over a situation it absolutely cannot change. So, spoiler alert, it isn't love keeping you awake. It's just your brain attempting to assert control over the past. Okay, so how do we fix this? Let's dive into Chapter 6, Reclaiming Emotional Freedom. First things first, we have to manage our expectations. Our brains absolutely love the psychologically clean feeling of a fresh start, right? That shiny illusion of an overnight new life. But let's be real, true transformation doesn't work that way. Real healing is slow, it's repetitive, and honestly, it's often deeply emotionally uncomfortable. Those unresolved patterns, they're going to follow you around like a shadow until you stop avoiding them. To actually achieve emotional freedom, you have to commit to 3 specific steps. First, you've got to stop letting your survival patterns make excuses for your behavior. Second, you must stop avoiding responsibility for your own happiness. And third, you need to start taking absolute ownership of your emotional well-being instead of relying on the ghost of a memory to provide it for you. Because once you start understanding these hidden psychological patterns that control human behavior, you begin to see exactly what everyone else overlooks. You actually start to see the mechanics behind your own pain. Which leaves us with this final, maybe slightly uncomfortable reality to consider tonight. Are you really missing them, or are you just avoiding the uncomfortable responsibility of healing yourself?